Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 304 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what is dyspraxia, and it is Sunday the 5th of January 2025 as I record this. So it turns out, and here's a little podcasting tip for all of you. If you want to play around with your mic settings and you actually install a firm update, please make sure that you test the audio recording volume before you record the first part of a podcast episode. This is the second time I've recorded this introduction section because I realised before I recorded the much longer content part of today's episode that something was wrong. So this intro has to be re-recorded. So just a little podcasting behind the scenes info for you. Today's podcast episode is absolutely brilliant. It's really fun, it's really insightful, and I definitely learned a lot from it. Because by the end of today's podcast episode, you're going to have a much deeper understanding of what is dyspraxia, what are the symptoms of dyspraxia, what causes dyspraxia, and also how is dyspraxia treated. So by the end of this podcast episode, you're going to come away with a lot of great information, which is really going to help you in the future, especially if you want to work within the area of Pacific learning difficulties. So you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. And also, because it's the first episode of the year, I'm actually not going to do a psychology news section because the BPS Research Digest hasn't been sent out for 2025, and that's where I actually get most of my psychology news from. But I will end on a little personal note. So it's been absolutely great. I've been back in Canterbury because I went back to my parents over Christmas. Now I'm back in Medway. It's the new year, and I do highly recommend June Part 2 because that's what me and my housemates watched a New Year's Eve. So it's really good to be back in Canterbury, being back in my office, which is basically like my bedroom because I'm able to be productive. I'm having a lot of fun doing some writing, doing some psychology bits. Decided to analyse my last psychology study, and life is really, really good at the moment. So I hope that you had a wonderful new year and you had a lot of fun, whatever you were doing. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me at connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi Wiley or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. Also, I'm now on Blue Sky. So if you want to contact me there, then please feel free. Again, I still don't know how these social media handles work for Blue Sky, but I'm pretty sure I'm connorwhiteley.bsky.social, something like that. Also, please feel free to send pictures of where you're listening from. I absolutely love to see where everyone is listening from around the world. And I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuropsychology, neuroscience, and cognitive psychology. So the reason why this is a brilliant sponsor for today's episode is because dyspraxia is actually a neurological condition. So today's podcast episode heavily draws on concepts from neuropsychology and neuroscience. And this is a great, really easy to understand and engaging books help you to develop your knowledge in these areas. Because by the end of the book, you'll be able to understand what is cognitive psychology and how our mental processes impact our behavior. For example, how does memory impact our behavior? And also, like, why memory isn't actually as perfect as everyone thinks it is. But also, we talk about our thinking biases. How do we think? How do we make the decisions? But also, all of the thinking errors that we can make when thinking, which leads us to make less effective decisions. And then we also do talk about cognition in the digital age. For example, transferable memory, which is a fascinating topic, and so many more brilliant topics which I flat out love. Because at this point in my psychology career, I'm definitely past the point of saying, "Oh, I don't like cognitive psychology," because in reality, I really do, and it is really interesting. So I highly recommend this. Is a brilliant book. So that's Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuropsychology, neuroscience, and cognitive psychology. Available from all major ebook retailers. You can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, or local library if you requested. Audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence. Now you can add selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes& Noble, and selected library systems like Baker and Taylor, Biblioteca, and Overdrive. And whilst buying books helps us support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons because your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. And in 2025, I am going to take Patreon a lot more seriously, just so we can hopefully turn it into a nice little psychology community. Then, if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, now you can at patreon.com/psychology world podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Con So that's enough of the personality. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So, moving on to the content part of today's episode. So, we're going to be talking about what is dyspraxia. This is a great episode. I really enjoyed it, and I know you're going to learn a lot from it. So, let's dive into it. So, what is dyspraxia? Dyspraxia is a neurological condition that impacts a person's coordination and planning of their gross and fine motor skills, although it can impact perception, memory, information processing, judgment, and other cognitive abilities too. As well as because the condition impacts so many areas of the brain and body, dyspraxia looks different in different people. Also, dyspraxia is often used interchangeably with developmental coordination disorder because it is the most common type of dyspraxia. Furthermore, dyspraxia is typically recognized in early childhood when a child experiences delays in achieving normal, as in air quotes, motor milestones like sitting up and crawling. Then, symptoms tend to last into adolescence and adulthood. For example, I needed extra lessons before school started to learn how to throw and catch, and as a teenager, I was still mocked for my clumsiness and having no coordination whatsoever. In terms of coexisting with other conditions, dyspraxia can exist by itself, but it's often seen alongside other conditions like dyslexia and autism, like I do, and ADHD too. And it's important to know that dyspraxia is not a learning disability, but it can negatively impact a person's ability to engage fully in social, professional, and academic activities. For instance, dyspraxia can impact a child's working memory, so they can experience poor performance in a class. Therefore, it's important for children with dyspraxia to get a diagnosis so the school can provide specific and targeted accommodations so the child can succeed and thrive in education. In addition, according to the Dyspraxia Foundation, dyspraxia is believed to affect anywhere between 6 and 10% of children, to some extent, with 2% of their children being severely affected, as well as males are more likely than females to develop the condition. What causes dyspraxia? Overall, the cause of dyspraxia isn't known, but we do understand some of the risk factors. For example, according to the DSM-5, having a premature birth, low birth weight, exposure to drugs or alcohol use during a pregnancy, and a family history of the condition all increase the likelihood of a person developing the condition. Also, if the client has another condition like ADHD, then this can have a major impact on how the dyspraxia presents itself. What are the symptoms of dyspraxia? In terms of the symptoms tend to appear early in life, thus babies with dyspraxia can have problems with feeding and be overly irritable. Then, when the baby reaches toddlerhood, the child can continue to have problems with feeding, and they show other developmental delays too. For example, people with dyspraxia tend to have difficulties with toilet training, being unable to throw and catch a ball, as well as they can refuse to play with toys or puzzles that require construction. So for me, I flat out hated throwing and catching a ball because I was so bad at it. My primary school even required me to have extra lessons before school started because my coordination was so bad. Also, I was surprised that construction was a difficulty for people with dyspraxia, because as a kid, I flat out loved Lego, but I didn't build it myself till I was about 10 years old. The first 5 years, or perhaps longer, of me playing with my Lego, my dad had to build it all by himself because I just couldn't understand how to do it. Furthermore, another set of symptoms for dyspraxia is that children with the condition might frequently drop things and have the difficulties in their hand-eye coordination. This can lead to issues with managing zippers and buttons. Also, it isn't uncommon for children with dyspraxia to avoid physical activity because they don't want to feel the shame and embarrassment associated with being bad at it. Because their dyspraxia can lead to a lack of muscle development that only compounds the difficulties they face with physical activity on top of their lack of coordination. Building upon this, the weak muscle tone associated with dyspraxia doesn't only impact a child's ability to take part in sport and gym-based activities, it can even impact their ability to stand for any length of time. In my experience of dyspraxia, my hand-eye coordination has always been difficult, and it took me ages to learn how to tie my own shoelaces, get dressed, and I definitely avoided physical activity. I think for a time I did enjoy sports, but because I was so bad at it, people would make comments and point out how useless I was at sports, and I just ended up hating it and avoiding it. Also, I'm not 100% sure that this is connected to dyspraxia, but building upon the point about weak muscles, as a child I had a very, very weak neck according to my parents. I couldn't actually support the weight of my own head with my own neck muscles, so I needed physiotherapy as a kid to strengthen them. Additionally, children with dyspraxia tend to have writing and speech delays, losing things, forget things, and they have trouble picking up on non-verbal social cues. Also, dyspraxia can cause issues with motor coordination, perception, memory, speech and language skills, emotional control, and following directions. All of these other symptoms can cause a lot of difficulties with concentration, organisation, and planning, as well as accuracy. Interestingly, the overall result of these behaviour is impulsive or erratic behaviour. or people with dyspraxia avoid unpredictable or new situations or even scenarios that require teamwork, ultimately leading to a wide range of behavioral and emotional difficulties that can include anxiety, depression, fear, stress, phobias, addiction, and low self esteem. Personally, I can see why people with dyspraxia tend to get misdiagnosed with autism because there is an overlap here. But autism has a lot of characteristic features that dyspraxia does not. Like autism has the lack of eye contact, hyperfixations, repetitive behaviors, amongst others, that dyspraxia lacks. Also, I would say that my lack of ability to follow directions, have good motor coordination, and have good speech and language skills has definitely impacted my mental health over the years. Not because I have an issue with the symptoms I experience because of dyspraxia, but because of other people being mean, making negative comments, and judging me for not being perfect at these skills that everyone else takes for granted. How is dyspraxia treated? Whilst there is no cure for dyspraxia, it is still perfectly possible for people with the condition to live a full, good life where they can thrive and succeed in whatever they want. Although there are some treatment options that help with some of the symptoms of the condition and to improve muscle tone and their coordination. I've already mentioned that I've received speech and language therapy and physio as a kid, and that helps me. The children with dyspraxia can receive occupational therapy, other special services, and accommodations through their school too. In the home, children with dyspraxia can be encouraged to take part in physical activities and physical play that helps to strengthen their muscle tone as well as improve their physical coordination. Typically, cycling and swimming are often helpful to keep children with dyspraxia physically active, and this helps to reduce their risk of obesity. Now, that was something that I struggled a lot with as a kid. Also, children with dyspraxia can work on puzzle activities and skills like throwing a beanbag to improve the hand-eye coordination, as well as using pencil grips, learning to type, and other simple interventions can help them improve their communication skills. Conclusion. Personally, I really enjoyed learning about dyspraxia because now that we've looked at what dyspraxia is, what the symptoms and causes, and what the treatment options for dyspraxia, a lot of things make sense. I can see how a lot of difficulties in my life were caused by dyspraxia, and thankfully, a lot of treatment options that I've received have worked and have decreased a fair amount of the difficulties that my dyspraxia caused me. Whilst this stage in my life, as I've been through school and basically done with university, and I passed my driving test a few years ago, this diagnosis doesn't change anything majorly for me. Yet it's nice to know that there was a neurological reason why I had so many difficulties as a child, and this wasn't because I was useless, like some other people said. I had dyspraxia, and that is why I wasn't great at sports, had awful motor coordination, and it was responsible for a lot of other things that people didn't like about me. And now I can go forward in my life, knowing and being able to explain why I have such difficulty with certain things. In the case that someone calls me a problem, I am never a problem. I am just a person with a neurological condition that might need a little extra support and help compared to others. That doesn't make me a bad person, and this is one of the few times where a diagnostic label can be empowering instead of debilitating and stigmatizing. I had dyspraxia, and I'm proud to finally know the truth behind my difficulties. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did because learning about all these different mental health conditions, well, to be honest, the only two that I've got at the moment, has been really useful, really insightful, and it's definitely going to help me in the future explain a few things. So, but that brings us to the end of this mini series about Pacific learning difficulties. I'm half tempted to continue later in the year, but right now I've got so many more exciting podcast episodes coming up for all of us. So I'm definitely looking forward to writing them, researching them, and making them into podcast episodes so all of us can enjoy them. And if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, then please definitely check out Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuroscience, neuropsychology, and cognitive psychology, available from all the usual places. And if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, now you can at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. And if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at connorwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.